Okay, so when you think of Thomas Edison, what's the first thing that jumps into your head?
Oh, the light bulb, almost certainly.
Hmm.
Maybe the phonograph.
Right, exactly. Motion pictures, maybe? He's often called the man who invented the 20th century. But what if I told you one of his biggest legacies, one that's often kind of overlooked, is actually in medical devices?
Yeah, it's a fascinating link, isn't it? Our deep dive today, it's based on this article, The Light Bulb, Cystoscopy, and Thomas Alva Edison. And it
Hmm.
really digs into how Edison's big invention, the light bulb, didn't just, light up homes.
Right.
It literally shone a light inside the human body. And it pushed medical diagnostics forward at, well, a speed that was pretty stunning for the time.
So that's our mission today, really, to unpack how this general invention, the incandescent light bulb, so quickly sparked a whole new area in medicine. We want to look at how fast his invention spread and these, surprising other uses that popped up.
Uses that are still relevant, really.
Absolutely. Okay, let's dive in. Edison, he's this huge icon of American ingenuity. His name basically means invention. That picture in your head is probably the light bulb glowing.
hmm But what's often missed, I think, is just how wide his influence was. I mean, think about it. He was born in 1847. Lincoln was in Congress then. And he died in 1931, right in the middle of the Great Depression. He saw this massive transformation of America, what Henry Adams called its coming of age.
Wow, that puts it in perspective.
And Edison, his mind was just laser focused on the practical uses of electricity,
Yeah.
how to make it work for people.
We tend to imagine the light bulb invention as this single flash of genius, eureka.
Right.
But the sources, they paint a much more complex picture, don't they? A richer history. So what does that mean for the light bulb story itself?
Well, it brings up a really important point about invention generally.
Mhm.
Edison gets a lot of the credit, sometimes all the credit, but there were actually many others working hard on electric lights way before his big debut.
Oh, interesting. Like who?
Well, the article mentions things like the Jablonskov candles lighting up Paris back in 1877, and even earlier folks like Joe Bart in 1838, J.W. Starr in 1845, Dr. J.W. Draper in 1850, and crucially, Joseph Swan over in England. He'd been working on incandescent bulbs for years.
Okay, so if others were already in the game, what was Edison's unique game-changing contribution? What made his bulb the bulb?
Yeah, good question. If you look at the bigger picture, his true genius wasn't just the bulb itself, it was the whole system.
The system.
Okay.
Right?
His big contributions were things like finding a much better filament, eventually the carbonized bamboo one, which is where that whole genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration line comes from.
Ah,
With screw cap, so you could actually change the bulb easily. Plus, and this is key, the subsystems, the generators, the delivery, insulating the cables properly. Oh, and he was a master of publicity. He knew how to get the word out.
right, the whole package. Now, this is where it gets really wild for me, just how fast this thing took off. The article lays out some dates that are just incredible. Can you walk us through that timeline?
It's pretty breathtaking, actually. So the core breakthrough happened in this super intense period in October 1879. Over just 5 days, October 16th to the 21st, his team dramatically improved the vacuum inside the bulb from 1,100,000 of an atmosphere down to 11,000.
Which just sounds technical, but was that the key?
Absolutely key. It meant the filament wouldn't burn out nearly as fast. So his first really viable bulb started glowing then. And then, check this out. Just 2 months later, December 21st, 1879, he leaks the story to the New York Herald.
Leaks it. Strategic.
Very. And then, incredibly, just 4 days after that, on Christmas Day, December 25th, they started having special public viewings of the lights at Menlo Park.
Wow. From lab bench to Christmas spectacle in literally weeks. That's marketing genius right there, too. How did that translate commercially?
Well, he patented the screw cap, as I mentioned. The first bulbs actually sold for 40 cents, even though they cost him about $1.40 to make.
Selling at a loss initially.
Yeah, to build a market.
Yeah.
And it worked. The adoption curve was just phenomenal. Look at these numbers. 100,000 bulbs sold in 1882.
Okay.
That jumps to 4 million by 1892.
4 million.
And wait for it, 45 million by 1903.
Good grief. That's explosive growth.
It really is.
So with that kind of rapid spread, you start wondering, where did these things pop up first, beyond just, rich people's houses or labs?
Right. And the article gives some great examples of how quickly it permeated different parts of life. The first church, the first post office, the first ship, all lit up in 1892.
Okay, so about 12, 13 years after the main invention.
Yeah. And then the very next year, 1893, you get the first hotel, the first theater, even the first electric advertising sign. It just shows how fast people grabbed onto this new tech.
It really does typify that rapid dispersal. So you have this world-changing invention spreading like wildfire. And then comes the twist we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
How fast it jumped into medicine. How on earth did Edison's light bulb end up inside someone's body?
Well, what's really interesting here is that as soon as Edison showed his stuff, competitors and specialty manufacturers jumped right in. They saw niches.
Ah, the ecosystem effect.
Exactly. And that led two guys, Dr. Henry Koch and Charles Preston, up in Rochester, New York, to develop a much smaller bulb, a low amperage one designed specifically to fit into medical instruments.
A mini bulb, tailor-made for medical use. Okay, so when did someone actually put one into a device?
The article pinpoints it. By 1883, so pretty early on, Dr. David Newman in Glasgow managed to put one of these tiny Edison-type bulbs right on the tip, the distal end, of his cystoscope.
His sister what?
Cystoscope. It's an instrument they use to look inside the bladder.
Got it. Okay, 1883. That's only 4 years after Edison's big public debut in '79. That is incredibly fast for medical adaptation back then.
It really is stunning. And it wasn't just Newman working in isolation.
Others jumped on it too.
Oh, yeah. By 1886, a really key figure in urology, a guy named Nitze, started using the Edison bulb. And so did his old collaborator, Joseph Liger, over in Vienna. In fact, both of them showed off prototypes with these little incandescent bulbs at the tip at a big surgery congress in Berlin in 1887.
Wow.
Nitze even got a company, Friedlander, to custom make what he called mignon bulbs, tiny bulbs just for his instruments back in 1886.
So it wasn't just using the tech, it was actively adapting and customizing it almost immediately for specific medical needs. That's impressive. Was everyone thrilled about this, though? Any pushback?
Well, that's always part of the story with new tech, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not everyone was immediately convinced. The article mentions there were anti-technologists. You could maybe call them Luddites in this context. It cites articles by William C. Otis, who was voicing some skepticism about these newfangled approaches.
Understandable, I suppose. Fear of the new.
Probably. But by the end of the 1800s, incandescent cystoscopy, using these little bulbs, was becoming pretty standard practice for doctors dealing with urinary tract problems. The practical benefits clearly won out over the initial hesitation.
It's just amazing to think that only 8 years, roughly, after Edison perfected his bulb, Nitze was already using modified versions in his, second and third generation cystoscopes.
Yeah.
It just hammers home how quickly a foundational technology could leap into a super specialized, life-changing medical tool.
It really does, and it sums up Edison's legacy nicely, I think. His focus wasn't just the invention, it was the application, the whole system. And by doing that, he didn't just light up cities. He laid the groundwork for completely new fields to just explode, sometimes in really unexpected ways.
Like peering inside the human bladder.
Exactly. The cystoscope is just such a perfect case study of how a big, general-purpose technology can rapidly lead to these incredibly specific, vital applications.
There's a quote in the article from Henry Adams. He said, "Nothing in education is so astonishing as the amount of ignorance it accumulates in the form of inert facts."
It's a good one.
And I feel like that's what we've done today. We took this seemingly simple fact, and Edison invented the light bulb, which can feel a bit inert, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully we've shown how dynamic and interconnected that whole process of innovation really is, how even the most famous inventions have these fascinating, sometimes hidden layers and legacies.
Absolutely. Makes you wonder.
Yeah. What other inert facts are out there, just sitting around waiting for someone to shine a light on the deeper story they're hiding? Makes you think, doesn't it?
It's fascinating, isn't it, how these threads, this endurance, even rebellion, going against the grain, it seems to echo right through Thomas Edison's own life. It really speaks to this deep family history of resilience, maybe defiance, and definitely independent thinking that clearly shaped him. I mean, consider this whole multi-generational saga. You've got his great-grandfather, Thomas Edison Sr. He fought against the British in the American Revolution, 1775 to 81. But then his grandfather, John Edison, does the opposite. He sides with the Loyalists. He's part of that great exodus, in 1783 when Loyalists headed up to Canada, becomes a Canadian citizen.
Wow. Okay. So revolutionary grandfather, loyalist grandfather.
Exactly. And then fast forward to Thomas's own father, Samuel Edison, born in Nova Scotia, so Canadian by birth. And he picks up the family's, let's say, rebellious side again. He fights as a captain, get this, in Mackenzie's insurgents. This was during the 1837 rebellion in Ontario, again, against the British establishment there. And this forces him to flee. He basically becomes a political refugee, escapes to Ohio,
Mhm.
settles down with his wife, Nancy Elliott, and that's where Thomas Alva is born. So this isn't just ancestry, it's a whole saga of defiance, adaptation, a refusal to just conform,
Mm.
qualities you see very clearly in Thomas Edison himself.
And there was something else interesting in the family line, too, wasn't it, about longevity?
Oh, absolutely, you can't overlook that. The sources mention this remarkable longevity. His great-grandfather Thomas lived to 104. Astonishing. Grandfather John made it to 102. And his father Samuel lived to a very robust 92. It points to what the sources call a vigorous, hardy stock, this incredible endurance.
Mhm.
You have to think that kind of, well, biological gift, that stamina. It must have served Thomas incredibly well during his own extremely long, grueling, inventive life.
That makes sense. Given that kind of nonconformist family history, maybe it's not so surprising that formal school wasn't really his thing. He was basically homeschooled, right, by his mom, Nancy Elliott, who clearly kind of got him in a way that the regular school system didn't. This wasn't just him being, bad at school. It's just something deeper, like a foundational skepticism, maybe. An empirical way of learning. His family moved, you said, from Milan, Ohio to Port Huron, Michigan when he was 7, and he only lasted, 3 months in public school?
It's 3 months. It's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And the sources are very clear. His mind just did not follow the grooves of school learning.
Hmm.
And you ask a great question. What was it about his mother's approach? Well, Nancy Elliott had been a school teacher herself. She saw his incredible curiosity. She understood his mind didn't work with, rote memorization or rigid structures.
Mm-hmm.
So she took over his education, made sure he could read and write proficiently. Though, interestingly, the sources say he never cared for arithmetic, which is kind of funny for a future engineer, right?
Yeah, a bit ironic.
But this early, self-directed, and crucially empirical way of learning, it shaped everything. He apparently showed this great thirst for experimenting, especially chemistry. He'd spend all his pocket money, which wasn't much, on chemicals. Then he'd disappear into the cellar, his first little lab, trying out their properties to see if what the book said was true. And this is key, the sources emphasize. Throughout his life, Edison never accepted a textbook statement as final until it had been tried out. End quote, quote. This wasn't disrespect for knowledge. It was a core principle. Prove it yourself. Hands-on verification over just accepting theory. That skepticism, that need to test things personally, that was the bedrock of his genius, you could argue.
And this hands-on, self-taught thing quickly turned into, actual businesses, didn't it? Even before he was a teenager. But then there was that really pivotal moment, that life-changing event you mentioned earlier. Something about a lab fire, a train conductor, and it affecting his hearing permanently. I mean, imagine being a kid running this whole little media and science operation out of a train car, and then getting disciplined in a way that changes your life forever. It sounds almost like fiction.
It really does. It shows his incredible drive. And yeah, there were these almost mythical parts to his early life. Okay, so age 11. His first venture, taking family garden produce to market with a horse and wagon. Simple start. But by 12, he gets a concession from the Grand Trunk Railroad. He can sell newspapers on the train, the Port Huron-Detroit line,
Yeah.
62 miles. But he doesn't just sell papers. He uses the money, naturally, for more chemicals, more experiments, basically funding his R&D. Then he expands, hires other boys, opens 2 small stores. And get this, he moves his chemicals and gear onto the train, into the baggage car. Becomes popular with the train crew, they start calling him Al.
Al, the boy scientist on the train.
Exactly. Then at 14, he buys a hand printing press, sets it up in the baggage car, creating, arguably, the world's first mobile chemical lab and printing press, all on a train. He starts publishing his own newspaper, the Weekly Herald. He collects the news, writes it, sets the type, prints it, sells it himself. 800 copy circulation. By age 15, the sources say he's keeping an 18-hour workday. Just incredible energy.
An 18-hour day at 15, running multiple businesses off a train. It's hard to fathom. Okay, so what about this accident, the hearing loss?
Right, that happens in 1862. He's working with phosphorus in his baggage car lab. The train jolts, chemicals spill, start a fire. The conductor is furious, understandably. And the account says he soundly boxed young Thomas's ears, hits him hard, then throws all his chemicals and equipment off the train. Now, Edison himself later believed that blow, combined with another incident, where a train man supposedly pulled him up onto a moving car by his ears, that these events contributed significantly to his deafness.
Pulled him up by his ears. Ouch.
Yeah. The sources say that deafness became permanent and gradually increased over his life. But here's the truly Edison part, the vindication against fate, as one source puts it. Instead of letting it crush him, he reframes it. He famously claimed it was an asset. He argued it helped him concentrate, especially in noisy workshops, by blocking out distractions. I mean, think about the mental fortitude there, and the sheer irony, or perhaps testament to his will, that a partially deaf man goes on to invent the phonograph, the machine that records and plays back sound, turning a major physical challenge into an advantage. That just speaks volumes about his mindset.
That's an incredible way to look at it, turning adversity into a tool. So what's next for Al after the train car empire comes to an abrupt end? It sounds like something quite dramatic happened next, a heroic act that led him to his first real career. And crucially, a way to fund more experiments. Still learning by doing, reading the experts, but always asking, how does this actually work?
Precisely. August 1862. Another pivotal moment completely changes his direction. He's still hanging around the station, Mount Clemens Junction. He sees the station agent's little boy, 2-year-old Jimmy Mackenzie, playing right on the tracks. And there's a boxcar rolling towards him. Edison reacts instantly, jumps onto the track, grabs the child, pulls him clear just in time, gets a minor cut on his heel from the wheel, grazing him, but saves the boy's life.
Wow, just like that.
Yeah. And the station agent, Mackenzie, is obviously incredibly grateful. As a reward, he offers to teach Edison Morse telegraphy. Edison jumps at the chance, and with his usual intensity, he picks it up incredibly fast. Just a few months of lessons and practice at all hours. And for the next 6 years or so, he becomes a wandering telegraphist, travels all through the Midwest, the South, working for Western Union, gets a reputation as a really rapid and accurate operator, often working the busy press night shifts. The work also apparently helped him develop a clear, fast, and upright style of handwriting, which is interesting given his later notebooks.
So he's got a solid skill, a good job for the time, but I'm guessing his free time wasn't spent, relaxing.
Definitely not. All his leisure time, any spare moment, goes into experiments and studying. And it's during this time he discovers Michael Faraday's electrical researches. And he's captivated. But again, we see his learning style. He's not drawn to Faraday's math, which he famously disliked. He loves its close dependence upon experiment, its imaginative appeal. That really clicks with his hands-on approach. And this period, working with newswires, press dispatches, he gives him a large fund of general information. Plus, the sources mention his incredibly retentive memory. All his practical skill, empirical learning, and general knowledge is building the foundation for his next big step, becoming a full-time inventor.
It's amazing how he just seemed to absorb setbacks. That first patent, the vote recorder, sounds like a pretty big deal, demonstrating it in Washington. But it fails, and he just moves on. Doesn't seem fazed, dives right into something else. And then, like you said, a broken machine becomes his big break. That's pure Edison, isn't it? The problem solver, not the speculator. Tell us about that first patent again.
Yeah, his resilience is remarkable. So, October 1868, he's 21, gets his first U.S. patent. It's for this vote recorder, a clever gadget meant to speed up voting in places like Congress, record and total votes quickly. He demonstrates it in Washington, thinks it's going to be a huge hit, but nope. Finds out there's absolutely no demand for a mechanism of that kind. Apparently, legislators like the slow roll call, gave them time for political maneuvering.
Right, time to twist some arms.
Exactly, so it's a commercial failure. But crucially, the sources say he was undismayed. He heads back to Boston, makes a really bold move, quits telegraphy as his main job, decides to devote himself 100% to inventing, and immediately starts working on improving the telegraphic stock ticker.
And that stock ticker is what leads to the breakthrough in New York. It sounds like a case of being in the right place, right time, but also having the skills ready.
Absolutely perfect storm. New York, 1869. It's the chaotic gold room era. Gold prices are fluctuating wildly. Fortunes made and lost in minutes. So accurate, fast financial info is critical. The stock tickers are vital. One day, the main transmitter in the gold room, not one of Edison's yet, breaks down. Pandemonium? Edison happens to be there. He'd already carefully examined the machine just out of curiosity, figures out what's wrong, volunteers to fix it, gets it working again very speedily. Everyone's amazed.
Instant hero.
Pretty much. This immediately gets him recognized. They make him manager of the whole system. And what does he do? He immediately starts improving it, developing new inventions for it, including his own much better Edison stock ticker. That brings him much renown. And what's really telling about his focus, his character, this is all happening around the time of Black Friday, September 1869, one of the biggest financial panics ever. He's right in the middle of this speculative frenzy. But the sources stress he never speculated himself, nor even felt any impulse to speculate. He was just constantly at work, either in the office or machine shop, testing or improving. The invention was the thing, not the money itself.
That's such a key distinction, driven by creating, not by the market's ups and downs. Okay, so from fixing one machine, he scales up incredibly fast. Newark, New Jersey, he's running an invention and manufacturing operation. This really is the prototype for his famous invention factory, isn't it? And churning out patents like crazy, almost 120 in just 6 years. How did he ramp up so quickly?
It's an astonishing leap, yeah. And this Newark period is critical for understanding his evolution. Just days after that Black Friday drama, he co-founds Pope Edison and Company. It's called the first American firm of consulting electrical engineers, based in New York. That gets off the ground quickly, especially selling things to Western Union, gives him the capital for the next big step. And this is where he really combines invention and manufacturing. He opens these big machine shops in Newark, New Jersey, explicitly for both invention and manufacture. He's not just designing, he's building, producing. He's got 50 workers, sometimes a night shift too if orders are heavy. And Edison himself, he's the foreman for both shifts, often living right there, grabbing short naps, that incredible endurance again.
So he's inventing, managing a factory, basically working around the clock. What were the big innovations coming out of Newark then?
Well, during this super productive phase, the 1870 to 1876, it's mostly telegraphy breakthroughs. The most famous is probably the quadruplex telegraph. Think about it. Telegraph wires were like one-lane roads, one message, one direction. Edison's quadruplex basically turned it into a four-lane highway. Send and receive 4 messages at the same time on one wire, 2 each way, no interference. That was revolutionary for communication speed and capacity, hugely valuable for the telegraph companies. He also developed a high-speed automatic telegraph, just pushing the limits constantly. And yeah, during those 6 years, nearly 120 American patents, almost all on electric telegraphy, he's really established himself. And on a personal level, this is also when he gets married to Mary Stilwell in 1871. They start their family, Marion, Thomas Jr., and William.
That's an incredible pace. Inventing, manufacturing, starting a family. But it sounds like he realized something needed to change. His next move is to Menlo Park, New Jersey, setting up the legendary invention factory. This wasn't just moving house, was it? It sounds like a very deliberate, strategic decision. Optimizing for creativity, recognizing his real strength was pure invention.
Absolutely. The move in 1876 was entirely strategic. He found that juggling both invention and the day-to-day grind of manufacturing in Newark was just too strenuous. Even for his energetic temperament, which, as we've heard, was pretty boundless, he explicitly wanted to concentrate on invention. To shed the distractions of production, focus all that energy just on discovery, on solving problems. It does raise that interesting question about innovation, doesn't it? When do you focus purely on R&D versus integrating it with application? Edison chose for this period to separate them, create this dedicated invention hub, and it proved incredibly fruitful. It freed him up mentally and physically for some of his biggest breakthroughs, without the factory floor demanding his attention. It shows real self-awareness about how he worked best.
And one of the first really big things out of Menlo Park was improving the telephone. Bell had just shown it off. And can you imagine a world without the word hello? Apparently that's Edison. He didn't invent the phone itself, but he made it work practically, didn't he? Classic Edison. Improvement for usability.
It is classic Edison. The Bell telephone, demonstrated in Philadelphia, 1876, a sensation, a marvel. But the transmitter just wasn't very good for actual commercial use. Too weak, poor quality, you often had to shout. Edison immediately zeroes in on that practical problem. How do we make this usable for everyone? After much experimental labor, he comes up with his carbon button transmitter. We use the changing resistance of compressed carbon granules to make the signal much stronger, much clearer. This virtually converted the telephone from an experimental to a commercially available apparatus, made it practical. And yes, while experimenting with this transmitter, he needed a standard word to signal you were ready to talk or to answer his suggestion, hello, and it just spread out from Menlo Park until it became adopted by telephonists all over the world. One of those quiet everyday impacts.
Amazing. Did he work on the receiver part too?
He did. He also invented a completely different type of receiver, non-magnetic, called the electromotograph receiver.
Yeah.
Why? Because patent issues prevented from using the Bell electromagnetic receiver, so he worked around it. This one could produce very loud sounds, which was useful sometimes, but it did not come into extensive telephone use.
But the carbon transmitter plus hello, that's a huge contribution to making the telephone a part of daily life. Shows his drive to overcome limits and make tech accessible.
So he's improving communication, but then comes something even more mind-blowing for the time. The phonograph. Inventing something so amazing, a great wonder, and then just shelving it for a bit because he had bigger projects. That says a lot about his focus. What was the initial reaction? Oh, the phonograph was a bombshell. Truly astounding. 1877, he discovers and develops the first version. The idea you could capture sound and play it back. It seemed like magic. Early demonstrations, him recording Mary Had a Little Lamb and playing it back, people were absolutely stunned, scientists, the public, everyone. It was justly regarded as a great wonder at that time, something totally new.
So why put such a wonder on the back burner?
It highlights that strategic thinking we talked about. His mind is firing on all cylinders, multiple breakthroughs happening. But he had this sharp sense of timing, of impact. Despite the wonder of the phonograph, the pressure and the sheer potential of electric light were immense. The world needed better lighting. So he was reluctantly compelled to set this instrument aside for a time and leave its further development to later years. He knew the world was clamoring for practical, widespread electric light, and that project demanded everything he had right then. It's a sign of his strategic focus. He knew the phonograph was amazing, but the light was the immediate system-level challenge to crack.
And that brings us to the electric light. Probably his most famous invention, but like you said, the sources make it clear. The aha moment wasn't just the bulb, it was the system. Understanding they needed to be connected in parallel. That sounds simple now, but it was a complete paradigm shift then, right? What was lighting like before he jumped in?
Before Edison really tackled it, you had gas light indoors, which had its own issues, heat, fumes, fire risk. And outdoors or in large halls, you had these big, bright arc lights. Very powerful, but way too intense, dangerous, and expensive for homes or small shops. The big challenge everyone was chasing was the subdivision of electric light. How do you get lots of small, usable lights from one power source? Many people had tried making incandescent lamps heating a filament until it glowed, using platinum, carbon rods, all sorts of things. But none were commercially successful. They burned out too fast, were wildly inefficient, or just couldn't be integrated practically.
So everyone's focused on just making a better single bulb, but Edison sees the bigger picture.
Exactly. His crucial insight wasn't just finding the magic filament material. It was realizing that for a practical commercial system, the lamps had to be connected in parallel, like rungs on a ladder. Each gets the full voltage, works independently. This was totally against the leading idea then, which was connecting them in series end to end. Like old faulty Christmas lights, one goes out, they all go out. But connecting in parallel created a huge new problem. It required each lamp to have a long, thin, high-resistance filament. And making that kind of filament, one that was durable and consistent, was incredibly difficult. It actually made the material science challenge harder.
So he makes the problem harder, but it's the right problem to solve for a working system. How did he finally crack the filament problem?
Oh, it was a monumental slog, a vast number of failures, just relentless trial and error. He and his team tested thousands of materials, literally thousands, everything from exotic plant fibers to, famously, even beard hair. Carbonizing them, putting them in bulbs, seeing how long they'd last, millimeter by millimeter adjustments. His first real breakthrough lamp, October 1879, used a filament made from carbonized cotton thread. Very delicate. He put it in a highly evacuated glass globe. Getting a good vacuum was another huge challenge with sealed-in platinum wire leads. And it glowed for 45 hours. That was the proof of concept. But success, as the sources stress, came from overcoming in succession a large number of small difficulties, any one of which could have destroyed the project. Perfecting the vacuum pump, finding better ways to seal the wires into the glass, developing consistent carbonization methods. It was pure engineering persistence.
And like you said, it wasn't just the bulb. He had to invent the whole industry around it. The scale of that is just mind-boggling.
Absolutely. This is where you see Edison, the systems architect, not just inventor, architect. He knew the lamp was useless without the infrastructure. You need generation, distribution, control, metering, everything. So, based on the Menlo Park work, he literally had to create an entire industry from scratch. That meant designing and setting up factories. For the lamps themselves, mass production. For the dynamos, the generators. For all the switches, fuses, meters, the operating instruments, testing gear, and, of course, the wires, the conductors to carry the power.
Weren't dynamos already around, though?
Yes, but they were built for arc lights. High current, low voltage. His parallel system needed the opposite. Lower current, higher voltage, around 110 volts. So he had to design completely new, efficient dynamos for his system. And those dynamos needed new engines to drive them. Standard steam engines of the day weren't smooth enough. Their speed fluctuated, making the lights flicker badly. So he needed new high-speed engines with heavier flywheels, coupled directly to the dynamos for stable power. It was link after link in a chain he had to forge. After running smaller pilot plants successfully, he took the giant leap, built a central power station right in downtown New York City, 257 Pearl Street. And critically, with all the wires buried underground for safety and aesthetics, and through all this massive engineering project, Edison was his own chief engineer, overseeing every single detail.
Thinking ahead constantly. Light leads to power. then designing the whole grid we basically still use. 110 volts, underground lines, that clever three-wire system, all him.
So when did Pearl Street finally light up? What happened? It's September 4th, 1882. That's the date the Pearl Street station officially switched on the power, and it was successful from the first. It started small, but gradually expanded its network through lower Manhattan. At the time, gaslight was the main competitor indoors. But Edison's electric light had huge advantages. It was steady, no flicker, it was cool, didn't generate lots of heat, no combustion fumes or soot, and much less fire hazard than open gas flames. People loved it. It quickly gained popularity. And soon, Edison's systems started being built all over the world. It just transformed cities, homes, factories, ushered in the electric age. And it really does make you ask how much of our modern grid traces directly back to those specific design choices made at Menlo Park. It's a huge foundational legacy, pragmatic engineering for scale and efficiency.
It's stunning how many of those basic standards just stuck. He wasn't just inventing, he was engineering the future.
He really was. And his foresight was incredible. He saw beyond just lighting. He predicted, correctly, that once you had widespread electricity for lights in factories and homes, it would immediately admit the use of the electric motor for operating machinery and household power devices. Light was just the beginning. Power was next. He knew that once the grid was there, people would find ways to use that power. His first motors were running at Menlo Park as early as 1880, and motor technology developed rapidly on his systems, and later things like electric railways built on that foundation.
So, creating the demand with light, then designing the efficient delivery system for power, too. What were those key engineering choices that are still with us?
Well, several core features of his Menlo Park system design are remarkably persistent. Shows how right he got it. First, the voltage. He set it at or near 110 volts very early on. That standard is still used in North America and other parts of the world today. Second, his insistence on putting the wires underground. An interconnected system of underground iron pipes carrying within the insulated copper conductors. He knew for cities, overhead wires were ugly and dangerous. Going underground was essential for safety and public acceptance. He faced very great technical challenges doing this, digging up streets, insulating cables properly, preventing shorts, but he solved them.
Okay, underground cables, 110 volts. What else was so fundamental?
Third, back in 1880, he came up with the idea of dividing the conductors. You had mains that directly fed the lamps on a street or in a building, and then thicker feeders that brought power from the station to supply several mains. This hierarchical system meant a large saving in the total weight and cost of the copper needed. You didn't need massive cables everywhere. Very clever, very economical. And fourth, soon after Pearl Street opened, he invented the three-wire system. Genius move. Added a third wire, a neutral, but it allowed the main conductors to be considerably reduced in size, cutting the total amount of copper needed down to about 1/3 for the same power delivery. Think of the cost savings globally over a century. These weren't just inventions, they were foundational economic and engineering decisions that made electrification viable on a massive scale.
It's just layer upon layer of innovation. But then there were things he discovered almost by accident, things that others later picked up. You mentioned the Edison effect.
Yes, it's fascinating how his deep, hands-on experimenting led him to observe things whose full significance wasn't clear for decades. Serendipity in the lab. The Edison effect, he noticed this in 1883 while working on improving the light bulbs, specifically exhausting the air from them. He saw a strange discharge like a current flowing from the hot filament to the positive wire clamp inside the vacuum. It also left a dark deposit on the glass. He documented it, patented it even, but didn't really pursue its application. It was just a curious phenomenon related to lamps. Years later, others, like Fleming and de Forest, built directly on this observed effect. It became the basis for the thermionic valve, the vacuum tube, which was the absolute foundation for radio, for electronic amplification, for the entire field of electronics for decades. He'd found the principle of the diode, but its time hadn't quite come.
Incredible. And something even earlier, this etheric force. That sounds like proto-radio.
Even more astonishing, maybe, back in Newark, 1875. So even before Menlo Park, he builds this setup, a generator using a vibrating spark coil, and a receiver, which was just a dark box with two graphite pencil points very close together. And he observes small sparks jumping between those pencil points in the receiver, even when it was in the same room, or sometimes even an adjacent building to the generator. He knew it was something new, some kind of invisible force traveling through space. He called it etheric force. This was years before Heinrich Hertz formally demonstrated and studied electromagnetic waves in 1889. It took long researches of later years in various countries to connect Edison's 1875 experiments with electromagnetic waves and what became radio communication. He was literally generating and detecting radio waves without fully understanding what they were or what they could do. Shows how far ahead his experimental intuition sometimes ran.
So after basically inventing the modern world at Menlo Park, discovering hints of electronics and radio, he builds this huge new lab in West Orange, New Jersey, and just keeps inventing. Moving pictures, better batteries, synthetic rubber. The range is just staggering. What prompted that move, and what was this later phase like?
Right, the move to West Orange marks another major shift. A few personal changes happened first. His first wife, Mary, sadly died in 1884. He temporarily moved his lab work to New York City. Then in 1886, he remarried to Miss Mina Miller. They made their home at Glenmont, this lovely estate in Llewellyn Park, West Orange. That was his home for the rest of his life. And starting in October 1887, he began work in his new West Orange laboratory. And this place was huge, commodious, the sources say, much larger, much better equipped even than Menlo Park, a true industrial R&D center.
A new home, new lab, new scale. What kinds of things came out of this bigger invention factory?
This period really shows him moving from creating fundamental systems like the electrical grid towards refining things and diversifying into totally new areas. He applied that same methodical approach everywhere. It was here he finally perfected the phonograph, turned it from that early wonder into a real commercial product for entertainment and business dictation. He also developed his alkaline storage battery, a more robust, longer-lasting alternative to the common lead-acid batteries. Huge implications for portable power, later electric vehicles. And crucially, this is where he developed the motion picture camera, the kinetograph, and the viewer, the kinetoscope. He kept refining it until he got satisfactory reels of sporting contests. And the sources are clear. The moving picture industry of today acknowledges its start at the Orange Laboratory. Think about that. The birth of cinema, right?
Look, from light bulbs to Hollywood, essentially.
Amazing.
What else?
The list goes on. He worked on finding a source for synthetic rubber, especially important later during wartime shortages. Developed the telescribe, which was a device combining a telephone and phonograph for recording conversations. Invented a magnetic ore separator, trying to make low-grade iron ore viable. That was actually a huge effort, though not a huge commercial success ultimately. Plus, various improvements in manufacturing cement, other chemical products, and during World War I, he dedicated a lot of effort to developing war-related inventions for the U.S. government. It just shows his inventive drive was relentless, adaptable, always looking for the next problem to solve, the next industry to shape.
It's so clear it wasn't just raw brain power. It was that almost superhuman work ethic, that relentless curiosity, and a really strategic mind. He wasn't just inventing in isolation. He built this whole culture of pursuit, didn't he? Inspiring the teams around him. What about the man himself? What were his defining qualities?
People who knew him consistently mentioned his incredible energy, his directness, his courage, and also a fundamental kindliness. Physically tall, powerfully built, large head, countenance open and engaging, but leonine in repose. An imposing figure. And a terrific worker, especially before he hit 50. 20 hours straight wasn't unusual when he was deep into a problem. Quick meal breaks, then back at it. Total concentration. And he expected similar dedication from his team, not by being a tyrant, but by example. He never spared himself. The sources say the easygoing assistant dismissed himself. They just couldn't keep up with the pace he set. But when tackling tough problems like the lamp, he and the team worked days, nights, Sundays, and holidays until they became unmindful of time. Why? Because he could infuse them with his own enthusiasm. He created this intense, focused environment where the discovery itself was the reward, and even his recreation. When things were less frantic, he found it in change of work. He just loved to invent some new or better thing. His hobby was more invention.
And the famous notebooks, that habit of constantly jotting things down, how central was that?
Absolutely central. It was his process externalized. He always carried a small yellow-page notebook, filled one up in about a week. He'd write down ideas as they hit him. Quick sketches, date, subject. Might stop mid-meal, mid-conversation to capture it. Could make 20 such rough designs in a single day. Sometimes all related, sometimes jumping between completely different fields. Then he'd try some himself, farm others out to his assistants to explore. But he was always skeptical, ever incredulous about any invention that worked out successfully on the first trial. He wanted to know the struggle, the outstanding difficulty that had to be overcome. He knew real innovation came from wrestling with problems. And he was supportive, offered unfailing encouragement and sympathy to assistants who hit roadblocks. Failure was just data.
So thousands of ideas in those notebooks, but not all became patents.
Oh, far from it. Many initial sketches were just impractical, maybe commercially unviable. He expected only a small percentage to survive laboratory tests. But that fertility of imagination ran through them all. And a key point, he never sought to patent any process of which the inventive idea was not his own. A strong ethical line. Those 1,000-plus U.S. patents, they were the residual inventions, the ones he selected as probably workable and economically capable of self-support. The vast majority never got beyond the notebook or the laboratory stages. Those patents are truly just the visible tip of a massive inventive iceberg.
So not just ideas, but a disciplined method for tackling problems. How did he approach a big challenge?
It was very systematic. First step, clear comprehension of the existing state-of-the-art. He'd dive deep, understand everything already known, everything tried before. He'd watch processes, examine models, or just read voraciously. He had that amazing retentive memory and read incredibly fast, by the line instead of by the word, apparently. Absorbed information rapidly. Once he knew the landscape, step 2, lay out several plans for simultaneous experimental attack. Not just one path, but multiple approaches tested in parallel. He was fundamentally an optimist, a confirmed optimist, never doubted a solution existed, provided that every possible plan was tried, regardless of established opinion or textbook authority. Keep trying everything. And his patience, his tenacity were legendary. Most remarkable, seemed to defy discouragement, like spending weeks just teaching the phonograph to say the word species clearly. The sissa sound was tough for the early machine. He tried a very large number of devices until he got it right. Stubborn persistence.
And what about his personality? How did he interact with people? Amiable, demanding?
Most accounts describe him as simple, modest, direct, kindly. Impossible for him to pose or assume airs. He had vast practical knowledge, but never claimed to be more than an inventor. Formed opinions quickly, yes, but was very tolerant of different views. And crucially, he'd give way pleasantly to facts or demonstration. If you could prove him wrong, he'd accept it. Had a lot of charm, apparently. Secured the mutual goodwill of his assistants. Dissension in the team was very exceptional. Generally won esteem and goodwill everywhere. The sources even suggest his few detractors did not know him personally, implying that meeting him usually won people over, and that loyalty was real. The Edison pioneers, that group of early associates formed in 1918, met every year on his birthday for decades after. That says something.
What about his private life?
Privately, quite shy, dreaded public speaking. But around friends, he had a remarkable talent for humorous narrative, loved a good story, lived a happy life apparently. Very temperate habits, the source says, except in regard to hours of work. That was his one excess. And interestingly, indifferent to wealth, except for the opportunities it brought for more inventions and accomplishments. Money was just fuel for more R&D, not the goal itself.
It's clear the world absolutely recognized his contributions during his lifetime. That list of honors is just incredible. Degrees, medals pouring in from all over, leadership roles. When did that really start?
Well, after the phonograph in 1877 really captured everyone's imagination, the honors just started accumulating faster and faster as his inventions piled up. He got honorary degrees, like a PhD from Union College as early as 1878.
Right.
Later a DSc from Princeton, an LLD from the University of the State of New York, and the medals and decorations. It's a long list, really global, shows the reach of his work. France made him a Chevalier of the Legion of Honor in 79, then officer in 81, then commander in 89. That's their highest civilian honor.
And beyond the academic and the big international awards.
Oh yeah, lots from American institutions too. Medals from the American Institute of the City of New York for specific early inventions, the electric pen, the carbon telephone, back in the late 1870s. Later came the Cross of Grand Officer of the Crown of Italy, the Rumford Gold Medal, the Albert Medal from Britain's Society of Arts, very prestigious, the John Fritz Gold Medal, the Rathenau Gold Medal from Germany, the Franklin Institute Medal, and his contributions went beyond pure invention. During World War I, he headed the Naval Consulting Board, applying his mind to defense problems. Got the Navy's Distinguished Service Medal for that in 1920. He was fittingly the very first recipient of the Edison Medal, created in his honor by the American Institute of Electrical Engineers in 1923, elected to the National Academy of Sciences, got the Society of Arts and Sciences Gold Medal, and even the Congressional Gold Medal in 1928. I mean, even that partial list just shows how widely his genius was recognized across so many fields across the globe.
And the sheer number of patents, that's always the headline figure. Over 1,000 U.S. patents alone. But as you said, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Really highlights that incredible fertility of imagination.
It's an amazing number, 1,091 American patents granted between 1868 and 1928. 60 years of constant inventive output, and by 1910 he already had over 1,200 foreign patents in 34 other countries. But yeah, it raises that question, what's the real measure? Just the patents, or the sheer volume of exploration, the thousands of ideas in the notebooks? Edison's legacy suggests that maybe that hidden experimentation is just as significant, if not more so. Those patents were only the ones selected as probably workable and economically capable of self-support. Think of all the exploration that didn't meet that bar but still pushed knowledge forward. It wasn't just prolificacy. It was a highly selective industrial-scale process of invention.
And it's easy to forget with all the focus on electricity that he branched out into completely different industries too. Cement, chemicals, applying that same innovative industrial approach really shows his versatility.
Absolutely. It proves his inventive process wasn't tied to just one field. It was about optimization, new products, building industries, whatever the domain. So besides the huge factories for electrical equipment, lamps, dynamos, motors, he also designed and ran plants for chemical manufacturing, things like cement, a key material for the modern world he was helping build. Also plants for benzene, carbolic acid, aniline oil, aniline salt, other complex organic chemicals. Some of these were set up specifically for the war effort during WWI, showing that pragmatic response to national need. But significantly, the sources note that others are still in operation, years later, shows the lasting commercial viability of these non-electrical ventures too. He was a true industrial architect, applying systematic problem solving across the board.
So after this incredibly long, productive, world-changing life, how did the world react when he finally passed away? That image of the lights going out across North America, even for just a minute, that's such a powerful, fitting tribute for the man who lit up the world.
It was extraordinary, a deeply symbolic moment. Thomas Edison died on October 18, 1931. He was 84. Passed away at his home, Glenmont, in West Orange. The news went everywhere, of course. President Hoover heard it while on a battleship, the Arkansas. He immediately gave a nationwide radio address commemorating Edison. But yes, that tribute on the evening of October 21st, 1931, that was something else. They chose that date specifically. It was the 50th anniversary of his first successful incandescent lamp. And at Hoover's suggestion, for 1 minute, electric power was switched off. Central station lights dimmed across huge areas of the U.S. and Canada. A continent-wide moment of darkness. A nationwide tribute to the great inventor. Hard to imagine a more fitting gesture.
Were there other tributes, other forms of recognition after his death?
Oh, yes. Memorial meetings were held all over the world, reflecting that global impact. In 1932, the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, the AIEE, basically the professional body for the field he largely created, formally called him the founder of the electric lighting industry, end quote. Their resolution read, Edison passes, but his work goes on. He lives in the esteem of those who carry on under the banner which he raised, end quote, acknowledging his foundational role, and maybe one of the most interesting tributes, showing how fundamental his contributions were seen. It came from the Czechoslovakian National Committee. They actually proposed that the name of the great American inventor Edison should be assigned to an electrotechnical unit, end quote. Like the volt, the ampere, the ohm. They wanted an Edison unit, as a gesture of gratitude for his genius. It didn't happen, but the mere suggestion speaks volumes. He wasn't just seen as a tinkerer. He was recognized as a fundamental contributor to electrical science, an architect of the modern electrical age.
So when we wrap this up, what does it all mean for us today? For you, listening right now, living in this world, he did so much to shape. It means that even the simplest things, flipping a light switch, saying hello on the phone, watching a movie, the power grid itself, they all carry the DNA of Thomas Edison's relentless curiosity, his bold vision, and just his sheer stubborn will to make things work. He wasn't just inventing gadgets. He was a revolutionary systems thinker, a pioneering industrialist, an experimenter who changed daily life one practical step at a time. So much of our world rests on the foundations he built.
It really does. In this deep dive, it challenges that simple genius label, doesn't it? In our world of, quick fixes and instant results, what can we take from Edison's almost unbelievable patience, his insistence on trying every single possible plan, his deep belief that real invention wasn't just a flash of an idea, but the hard work of making it robust, practical, scalable, usable by everyone. Maybe the real Edison effect isn't just a scientific principle, maybe it's inspiration. Inspiration to keep asking, what if? But more importantly, to follow up with, okay, now how do we actually make it work reliably, efficiently, for everybody? His legacy isn't just patents on a shelf. It's a kind of blueprint for persistent, system-level problem solving. And that continues to light up our world, often in ways we barely notice.